Hey, welcome to episode 1 of the G-Town Breakdown. I'm Holden Tuma. I'm going to be your host. And before I get fully into what this show is going to be, I wanted to touch on who I am in the event that you are not aware, just to give a little bit of credibility to where I'm coming from. So, my name is Holden Tuma. I am a junior this year at Southwestern University, and I've lived in Georgetown my whole life. I've gone to pretty much every Georgetown school, including GHS. I've played football there, and something that I've always wanted to do ever since I was a kid was be a broadcaster. And so my senior year at GHS, I was offered a position to join the SHN broadcast crew that was covering Georgetown high school sports, which was absolutely a no-brainer for me. And after that season, I was invited to stay full-time on the crew, and which led me to staying local at Southwestern so that I could continue doing SHN without having to worry about driving 3 hours here and there and all over the place. So that led me here. This is my 4th season with the team, and over this past summer, I had the idea to create a dedicated weekly recap show going over all the things that happened in the previous week regarding Georgetown high school sports, in particular football, which leads us here. This is episode 1, so therefore, obviously, we're going to be going over the week 1 game between Georgetown and Victoria East that happened last Friday. What you can expect from this show, again, it's going to be a dedicated recap show, so in the event that you might have missed a game, this is going to try to touch on all the things you might have missed to give you all the information you maybe need for the next game. That way, your background information is filled in. Alternatively, this is also going to be a more detailed analysis and breakdown, hence the name, of what occurred the week before. Some of the stuff that we can't really get into or don't have the time to get into during our actual broadcast, this will be where you find that. And so it's going to be multifaceted. Again, and it's also going to grow as the season progresses. This is, again, week 1, the first episode. So this could absolutely be overhauled and changed and all kinds of things. And I'll update you guys as that happens or if that happens. But we're going to grow with each other, so to speak. But yeah, this is week 1, episode 1, and it's a pleasure to have you here. So I won't waste any more of your time. This will be the quick game recap of what occurred last Friday. So Georgetown went southeast about 2.5 hours to face off with Victoria East. They won the game 27-0. It was a pretty interesting game. I don't think anybody really expected the result we got. Maybe they expected the win, but maybe not how we got there. And this is going to be just a quick recap of the big events, the big plays that occurred that really drove the momentum of the game. So again, this is not going to be a total breakdown of everything that occurred, just kind of touching on the big stuff, and then we'll get more nuanced a little bit later. So firstly, it was a pretty slow start for Georgetown. Their offense in the first 2 drives totaled 29 yards, and they punted in both of those possessions. We're really used to seeing these last couple of years Georgetown's offense starting hot. They love to receive the ball because they were so confident in their ability to go down and score on their first drive, which puts their defense which puts the opposing offense and defense immediately at a disadvantage, because instead of executing the preset game plan with a tied game, now you're trying to execute a game plan when you're behind and your defense has already lost confidence. So it was a bit, I wouldn't say jarring, but just a different style of game that occurred today. And there was a lot of factors that can go into that. We can touch on that a little bit later, though. So again, Georgetown's offense a bit slow. First 2 drives, no points, 2 punts. But the defense came up clutch right after that. The Victoria East's first play after a punt, they tried to run a pretty slow developing play action, and the pressure from Georgetown was immediately in the face of Victoria East's QB. It forced an errant throw, which was intercepted by Malachi Miller, which then turned the very next play on offense into a deep strike touchdown from Caleb McDougal to Xavier Warren, a 32-yard strike to open up the score. After that, the next scoring drive for Georgetown was sparked by a 40-yard catch on the near sideline by Xavier Warren. It was just a simple go ball, and it was well thrown. Something that you might have noticed if you were watching, that the wind in that game was pretty rough if you were trying to throw into it, which Georgetown was in the first quarter, but this was in the second quarter, and now McDougal had the wind at his back, and so this ball came out much prettier than a lot of the passes we saw earlier in the game. But again, a 40-yard catch sparked this next scoring run. And who did score? Weston Stewart. Get used to the name. This was his first touchdown of the day. It was a 6-yard run about 2 minutes before halftime. And that was his first of many. And then first drive coming out of halftime, Georgetown's up 14-0. Victoria East presumably made some adjustments, had a game plan ready to go, and they immediately lost a fumble. The first drive back out, which completely stymies any sort of game plan that Victoria East came into the half with. Any sort of strategy or structure they tried to assemble, completely out the window. GT recovers the fumble. They ultimately do not score on this drive. They march down to Victoria East's 28, but they turn it over on 4th and 12. They had an opportunity to hit Holden Tuma with the seam ball down the middle of the field, but it was an excellent play by Isaiah Taylor to break the pass up in the end zone. Otherwise, it would have been a touchdown strike. So shout out to him, made a heck of a play. Georgetown turns it over. After a punt from Victoria East, Weston Stewart breaks free for a 46-yard touchdown run, his second of the day. That makes it 21-0 in about the mid-third. Next scene I've got, Victoria East drove down all the way to Georgetown's 22-yard line, which is the farthest they ultimately made it all day. They were, again, ultimately stymied on 4th and 10 from Georgetown's 26, which they turned it over. And then Georgetown marched all the way down to Victoria East's 15, and they turned it over on 4th and 3. Finally, the other two big things I've got, Georgetown later recovers yet another fumble in the late 4th, and then the offense turns that into another score. It was a Weston Stewart 2-play drive. His first run went for 32, and then he finished the drive with another 8-yard touchdown run with 3 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. It was 27-0. The final PAT was botched, so 27-0 was the final score. As you might have noticed, Georgetown's offense was a little up and down in that game. Rushing the ball, however, was down for maybe a quarter and then way up the rest of the game. Rushing the ball, Weston Stewart, 8 carries for 108 yards and 3 touchdowns. Zechariah Guyton, 15 carries for 108 as well. Jet Walker had 4 carries for 23 yards. In total, the team had 235 total rushing yards, 3 touchdowns, and averaged 8.4 yards a carry. Now, I did gloss over Jet Walker, and obviously he is the big question mark in regards to this game. Jet came in for maybe the first 2 drives or so, and then was pulled and did not return. And in his absence, we had a big question mark. Something that I actually noted before the game that we weren't able to get into in a bit of a rushed pregame was that there were a lot of quality depth pieces from last year's team that were no longer here, including the backup running backs. In fact, yes, if I remember correctly, which I do, the leading returning rusher behind Jet Walker from last season was Xavier Warren, the wide receiver, with 50 yards. Every other running back who had more yards than him is no longer with the team, either graduated or transferred or moved away, anything like that. So there was a big question mark in regards to the depth at running back, and Weston Stewart and Zachary Guyton answered the call. Passing the ball was a bit of a struggle, and I think Georgetown would be the first one to admit that. Now, there were a lot of other exterior factors that played into that. The wind was pretty rough, and again, it was a week one game, a windy day, an away game. A lot of those things can kind of influence into that. McDougal ended up finishing the day 7 for 20 for 103 yards and that 1 touchdown to Xavier Warren, the first score of the game. And we never really asked him to be highly efficient in moving the ball because we never needed him to. But passing was definitely not the prettiest day for the aerial assault. And then obviously that coincides with the receiving game. Xavier Warren had 3 catches, 73 yards, and 1 score. Copeland Madre had 2 receptions for 19 yards, and the other 2 receivers had 1 catch apiece. So it was not an eye-popping day statistically for the air attack, but running the ball more than made up the slack on their end and really kind of carried that offense. So overall, Georgetown's offense ran 49 plays. They had 338 yards and still averaged 7 yards a play. So even with their passing offense being large, defensively is a little bit trickier to